So like Steve said, I lead the design team at One North. Our group is a talented bunch of visual and brand designers, product designers, design systems experts, motion designers, and front-end developers. And so when I heard about the theme for this year's talk, about the epic poem, The Odyssey, and navigating uncharted waters and enduring strategies, I knew that I wanted my talk to be about visual storytelling, because that's what our team does, and that's what we are really, really good at. So I thought, what better way to start a talk about storytelling than with a story? This is the tale of a long voyage, a journey over many years. It's a chronicle of hunger and longing, of the search for shade and rest, of the tireless pursuit of something just beyond reach. And at the heart of it all, a flawed hero who begins his odyssey as a boy and ends it as a man. Now, it'd be fair if you think I'm talking about the Odyssey and that this is Odysseus, but that was a bit of a misdirect. This is the man in the story I'm talking about. Anybody know this book? Very good. The Giving Tree. So sorry, Jen and Tanya, I know I'm supposed to be on theme, but this fits with my talk better. Now, everybody close your eyes and imagine this book. Hopefully, you're all familiar with it and you read it as a child. What color is the book? Green. Very good. You guys are doing great. It's so memorable. It's one of my favorite books, and maybe I remember the green because I've read it so many times. Maybe I remember it because it's the only color used in the whole book. I don't know, but I always remember that. And the second thing I remember is the absolutely terrifying image of the author on the back. So it haunted my dreams when I was a child, and now it will haunt yours tonight. But anyways, it really is a favorite of mine. I got the book for my 4th birthday. I have that with me here today. It's precious to our family. I have 3 young kids. I read it to them all the time. And what I love about this book are how beautifully simple the illustrations are and how much restraint the author and the illustrator had in it. It's very special to me. I love the story, I love the message, but not everyone does, and that's okay. About 40 minutes ago, I walked back to my room to get this book because my whole talk is centered on this, and I ran into Jen Bernstein, and she said, "Oh, The Giving Tree. I effing hate that book." The kid is such an asshole. So I don't know what camp you're in. Jen is not the only one. I had this talk written, and I opened Instagram, and I saw that Adam Grant had shared, I don't know if you follow Adam, an alternate rewriting of the book. The title is The Tree Who Set Healthy Boundaries. And here's one of the pages on the inside. The boy says, "I want a wife and I want children, so I need a house. Can you give me a house?" And the tree said, "Okay, hold up. This is already getting out of hand." So I'm not going to discuss the merits of the message. That's not the point of this talk. But the Instagram link is down there if, Jen, you want to take a look at that later. Anyways, I wanted to use this book as an example because I think it so perfectly captures what I think great design is. And that's focused, clear design. So we're going to put the merits of the message aside and we're going to get back to the book. If you don't read it as much as I do, don't worry, I brought the full text. I have the book if you want it. It starts, "Once there was a tree, and she loved a little boy." I don't have time to read the rest, so I went ahead and put it all here on the slide, and I got it to fit on one slide. Isn't that great? The whole book, 620 words, 621 words. Could have put the poem on a piece of paper and distributed it that way. Probably would have been cheaper to distribute the book that way. But no, I think it's important to note some of the genius visual decisions that the author and illustrator made. He stretched those words over 64 pages. It's less than 10 per page. And what did he fill the rest of the page with? Not very much. It's 90% or more empty space. Close your eyes, see if you can remember what some of those spreads looked like. They captured childhood for me, and he would gather her leaves, and the boy loved the tree. Now, it would be fair if you're sitting here 5 minutes in wondering, where's she going with this? That's a book for kids. This is a conference or retreat for leaders and executives. But there's lots of children's books, and I picked that one for a reason. Our family, we're actually moving in 2 weeks from Atlanta to Michigan. Nothing stressful about the timing of this. And so I was packing up one of my kids' rooms, and all of our favorite books, so I put them out on the floor and I took a picture. And if you do a quick visual inventory, and these are some of our favorite books. We've got Rainbow Fish, Very Hungry Caterpillar, Stragonona, all the good ones. There's something very different about the aesthetic of these and the visual decisions made when you compare it and contrast it with The Giving Tree. I just feel this calm wash over me. I slow down when I read the words to this. And now after hearing Ryan's talk, I have a word for it, the sublime. And Jen has discussed, and that's okay. And all this matters, the reason I started with this story is because we are in an attention economy, and focus is scarce, and clarity is our currency. And that's where I think design can help. Anybody recognize a calendar like this? Yep, probably most people in this room. So I want you to imagine that you have a big proposal. You put a nice slide deck together, you're going to your stakeholder, your boss, somebody, and you get 30 minutes with them. Right in the middle of that. Or maybe you're presenting at your annual client conference and you get smashed in the middle of the day right after lunch. And you need to figure out a way to make your presentation stand out. Well, that requires vision, skill, and discipline. And that's where I believe design with a capital D can come in. We learned in Ryan's talk, design is a powerful business force. It's so much more than decoration. I think my biggest takeaway from Ryan's talk was that the design team is the backbone of this company. I'm kidding, of course, because what I think you've seen come out in a lot of the talks is that we all think like designers. The strategy team thinks like designers. The technology team thinks like designers. And that's sort of the cool part about One North. And the way I think about design is there's 3 key ingredients. Art, which thank you, Ryan, you talked about that without my prompting. Science, thank you, Kathy and Zach, you talked about how our brain works. And finally, craft. And I think when these 3 ingredients come together, when they converge in the middle, that's what makes great design. So what I'm going to do is unpack all 3 of those in the rest of this presentation. So let's start with art. Nothing new because of Ryan's presentation, but we know that art creates meaning. It's the soul of the experience. Craft delivers precision, and science brings structure. So let's unpack each one of those. And I know this room is not full of designers. In fact, I think 20% of you self-identified as being in a design role. And so this talk is for those of you that don't have formal design training, but still need to communicate effectively. You still need to sell ideas and persuade. All right, so we are going to start one by one. We're going to start with art. Now, I went to art school, but now I'm a designer, and I think there's an important difference between them. And I often talk internally and externally to clients about the difference between art and design. So I'm going to give you a few of my favorite phrases that I've used. Art explores, but design solves. Art creates meaning, and design creates clarity. Art makes you feel, design makes you act. Kind of get the point, I could go on. They're just different. One is not better than the other, but I think it's really important to, as a designer, to have art inform and inspire you. So let's go back and do a very brief history of art, starting back 32,000 years ago. This is a cave in France. If you've ever seen the documentary Cave of Forgotten Dreams, it's really amazing. They go through with these 3D cameras, and definitely recommend that. It's amazing how preserved these drawings are. So that was 32,000 years ago. Then if you look through just all of the different ways we as a species have communicated visually over the years. We carved into wood, we carved into marble, we wove tapestries, we painted frescoes on ceilings. Then we figured out how to make things move This is Gertie the dinosaur from 1914, the first very short animated film. Then we figured out how to tell that story and make it a little bit longer. Then we started designing products and presentations, all the way up to modern time. This is for you, Jen Lil. You can take an image from The Big Lebowski, turn it into Studio Ghibli format using Gen AI. And so when I look across that timeline, which I obviously picked a lot from 32,000 years, I noticed two things. One, there's a universal desire to tell stories visually. And two, the tools evolve, right? We started with charcoal and knives and things like that. But the fundamentals must remain. We can't forget about the important aspects of designing. And I think right now, a lot of the conversation in design and in most other industries are overly weighted to the tools, because there's a lot of exciting advancements going on. But this is sort of a call for us to not forget the fundamentals and to continue to develop those and continue to explore art and find ways to connect with people emotionally. And I think all of this matters when you're trying to craft a persuasive visual communication, because facts tell, but stories sell. And you may have heard an image is worth 1,000 words, and now product designers will tell you a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. Well, I think a story is worth 1,000 prototypes. I think it sticks with you and it connects with you in a way that no other medium does. But I want you to be able to do that visually really, really well. Okay, so that's art. Let's talk about the science of design. Now, for this part, I mentioned I went to art school. My sister is a scientist. She's brilliant. She has a PhD in biomedical engineering, and her partner is a neuroscientist. So I went to her and I said, I need help with this presentation. I want to sort of convey to people the scientific theories behind perception and cognition of visual stimuli and memory and things like that. So she said, no problem. I'll put a slide together. She's a little embarrassed. She's not a designer, so let's be gentle and see what she came up with. Oof. Okay, well, there's a lot of really good content on here, but unfortunately, it looks like she's fallen victim to all of the things I'm sure no one in this room has done, but I've watched other non-design clients smash onto screens. We've got 4 or 5 different fonts. We've got a lot of things in color, so it's sort of hard to see what's supposed to be emphasized and what's not. We've got some random photo of a robot finger. We've got a globe, not sure why that's there. So let's help my sister out. Trash this, take all that really good content, and spread it out over a couple slides. So I want to tell you all how we process information visually. I think that slide demonstrated why it matters, right? It can be really distracting. And I want to empower all of you to create better visual communications, better slide decks. So one, we're going to talk about how we learn better with both words and visuals. Then we're going to talk about the picture superiority effect, how we remember pictures more than words alone. And then last, the von Riestorff effect, noticing the distinct. We're going to unpack each of those with just a little bit more detail. So this first one, we learn better with both words and visuals, otherwise known as dual channel processing. Our brains actually process verbal and visual information through separate channels. And each channel has a limited capacity. You can only retain about 4 chunks at a time. So if you have all that information on one slide, people aren't going to be paying attention. They're actually going to be reading ahead and not listening to what you're saying. And so there's, we know that retention will drop. And so that's not helpful to you. All right, that was the first one. Number 2, this really interesting picture superiority effect. We remember pictures more than words alone. And so combining them together is really powerful. In this study, they measured the percentage of information retained after 3 days. Verbal only, people remembered about 10%. Verbal and visual, retention goes up to 65%. So keep that in mind. And if you need a helpful memory of that, remember at the beginning of my presentation, The Giving Tree. Do we think this book would have been as successful had it just been printed as a poem, words only? No, because the audience was kids, and so we know that words and images connect with that audience. But I also know that busy executives, when you have a calendar like the one I showed, probably had the attention span of kids as well. No disrespect. All right, the third one feels obvious to me as a designer, but it actually has a name, the von Riesdorf effect, and that's the law of distinction, or law of distinctiveness. We notice the distinct. So as designers, we're trained to do that through tools like shape, color, contrast, negative space. I know that's a scary one. And so these are the tools that we use, but I want to focus on one in particular to help all of you. And one more note about these. The key part here is being distinct. So if everything is bold, nothing is distinct. If everything is in color, nothing is distinct. If there's no negative space, nothing is distinct. And I want to double click into that one because in all my years as a designer, that's the one where I often sort of have to coach non-designers to get more comfortable with that. So let's get off the slide. Let's go to an art gallery, and I want to show you this principle in action. Okay, so here we are. Back to art just for a little bit. We're looking at all these paintings in this gallery. Maybe some of you have been here. I want you to tell me which painting is the most important in this room. Is it the biggest one? Is it the one hung highest? If you guess the one in the middle, because all that space around it compels you to feel the weight and the gravity of it, you would be right. That's the Louvre, and that was the Mona Lisa. Even though it's not the biggest painting there, you sense how important it is because of all that space around it. So think about how you can use that when you're crafting a PowerPoint slide or something like that. Speaking of PowerPoint, I know you're not all designing or painting the Mona Lisa, but when I thought about this room and I looked at everyone's job titles, I wanted to find some common ground, and I think the one medium we all use, unfortunately, is PowerPoint. And I am here today to give you the cheat code. And that is something only designers know about. You're going to want to write this down. I'm calling it the DeJong principle. Slides are free. You can use as many as you want in any presentation. You don't get charged for them. Nobody even knows how many you have. I have 130 some slides in this deck. Hopefully it doesn't feel like that much of a slog. If you don't believe me, maybe we can call our friends at Apple. They have this principle in their internal team that does all of the big product keynote deck designs. One idea, one slide. And you've probably seen this in action. Lots of famous product launches with Steve Jobs standing up on stage. They're not allowed to use bullet points. The fonts have to be bigger than 30 point. And it's really interesting, how much of a storyteller he became known as. And even their ads sort of followed this rule. The really famous iPod ad that came out, pretty brilliant copywriting too. It told a mini story there, 1,000 songs in your pocket. And I might argue maybe they were inspired by the aesthetic of the Giving Tree also. Now, can you imagine Steve Jobs up on stage with that slide my poor sister made? Apple would never. They would never. So I know a lot of times it doesn't feel like you have time, like Ryan was talking about this, it doesn't feel like you have time, but it really does matter. And you don't need to know Photoshop, you don't need to know Figma, you don't need to know what the difference is between a serif or a sans serif. You don't need to be a designer to give your words the pause they deserve. So I just spent 10 minutes taking that one slide, chunking out the information, putting it, onto some better templates, and hopefully you retain that information a lot better. I must clear my sister's name now. She had nothing to do with this, obviously. That was a bit. Okay, so just to recap everything I just talked about. Number one, we learn better with words and visuals. Use them wisely. Number two, we remember pictures more than words alone. Number three, we notice the distinct. Number 4, slides are free, or one idea, one slide. All right, third, craft. So we're gonna go back to the iPod, and then we're gonna go back even farther to the Braun T3 pocket radio. Who knows who designed this? Put your hand down, Ryan, you don't count. Dieter Rams. It's a requirement that in any design presentation, I think Kevin said this last year, you have to mention either Apple or Dieter Rams, so I get extra credit because I have both of them in here. Anyways, he was a famous product industrial designer for Braun, and he came up with these 10 principles of good design. I'm not going to read them all to you. It's been a lot of great, but a lot of heavy content today. I'm going to leave you with one that sums it all up. And this is how I feel about craft. Less, but better. And I'm going to show that principle to you in action. Imagine you're buying a handbag. You go to this store. Tons of options, tons of colors. How do you feel versus shopping at this store, where everything is curated, there's space around it? So the first store was TJ Maxx. Second one is a Chanel boutique. Again, no disrespect against TJ Maxx. I've definitely shopped there more than Chanel. But I think I often see people trying to cram tons of information onto a single slide, unnecessarily, not leaving enough white space to breathe. And I always go back to this analogy. Like, do you want it to feel more like a TJ Maxx or a Chanel boutique? So keep that in mind. All right, hopefully some of those tips and tricks will make your PowerPoints a little bit better, but maybe you're not in PowerPoint. I definitely have something that we all write, and that's emails. Think about these principles in an email. Who's received an email that looks like this? Who's written an email that looks like this? Right? It reminds me of the quote, "I'm sorry I wrote a long letter. I did not have time to write a short one." Or a more modern one, in the parlance of our times, "I ain't reading all that. I'm happy for you though," or "sorry that happened." All right, let's close out this section on craft with a quote from Dieter Rams. "One of the most significant design principles is to omit the unimportant in order to emphasize the important. Less but better." All right, so now we've just gone through the 3 ingredients for great design: art, science, and craft. And what do you get in the middle? You get great design. But I think what you really get when you listen to all the principles I just talked about is you get focus. And that's where the business value of great design comes in. Great focused design can crystallize ideas and make them more persuasive. So if you forget this, here are the 3 things I want you to remember. For art, use visuals. Leave space, probably more than you think you need, unless you're a designer. And third, edit, and then edit again. The power of focus and clarity goes far beyond design. And to further prove this, I want to go back to where we started with the giving tree. I think one of the really cool parts about the giving tree is how differently you read it or interpret it as a child versus as an adult. And so I wanted to sort of weave that idea into my talk. And so everything I just talked about, this Venn diagram of art, science, and craft, actually originated from something that had nothing to do with design. If we unpack those, that triangle, that Venn diagram, is actually from Henry Mintzberg, who is an academic who writes about business and management. And these are the 3 parts to his theory about great leadership and management. So he believes great managers combine art with vision and imagination, and you can inspire direction through creativity and an intuition. Good managers and leaders deploy science. They use logic and analysis to guide decisions with data and systematic reasoning. And third but not least, they deploy craft with hands-on skill and experience. And so I think it's really interesting to use this framework this science, art, science, and craft, and think about how to combine the heart, the head, and the hands in your own leadership and management practices. I think this framework is also interesting to think about how you assemble leadership teams and making sure that they're balanced in this way. All right, I think I've got time for one more story that kind of, again, crystallizes everything I've been talking about. I don't think this is the last time today you're going to hear about Lego. They are not sponsoring the conference or a client yet, but it's still a really interesting business transformation story. So Lego started decades ago. They were doing amazing, but then they had some missteps, and by 2003, they were $800 million in debt. They were losing about $1 million a day. They had just expanded into all these different directions. They had gone into theme parks. They had merchandise. They had all these different pieces you could buy. And so the company was really bleeding. So they hired a new CEO. I am not going to try to pronounce his name because I kept screwing it up in rehearsal. He was 35 years old, McKinsey consultant. He had never worked for a toy company. And he did 3 really interesting things. First, he challenged all of their existing assumptions. He sent all these ethnographic researchers out into the field to do exactly what Kathy and Zach were recommending. And they found that kids actually preferred constraints. Whoever was at my talk last year knows I'm a big fan of constraints. The kids preferred constrained sets with instructions more than they did just sort of free play. And so that was a really interesting insight. So they deployed ethnographic research. Then he really slashed the number of product lines they had by about 30%. When he started, they had 14,000 unique pieces. And by the time he was done, they'd cut that number to about 3,500. So not only did they reduce the number of unique pieces, they also reduced the number of colors. When Lego started, they had 5 colors: red, yellow, blue, white, and clear. And then they expanded up to 158 colors. So all these pieces, all these colors made production slow, inefficient, and expensive. So he reduced them down to about 60. And then the third thing he did was partnered with organizations and franchises like Star Wars and Harry Potter. He layered stories back into the product. And with all these changes, revenue grew by about 35%. So think about that business transformation story, and let's put it through my funnel, my framework. Did they use art to evoke emotion? Sure, with Harry Potter and Star Wars. What about science? He used ethnographic research to challenge their existing assumptions. And craft speaks for itself. They reduced the number of colors and the number of product lines. And what did that get them? A focused business. And more money, more importantly. All right. So hopefully, through those examples and through all of the principles I've talked about, you will take away some actionable take-homes when you are writing emails, creating PowerPoint decks, or doing designs. Ultimately, what we want to bring our people, our audience, is focus and clarity. And that will drive impact. And so if you go back to your desk and you've heard all these great talks and you can't remember exactly what I was talking about or the particulars of which effect I was referencing, just think about the giving tree. Close your eyes and imagine those pages and have confidence that less is better. Thank you.